you were able to, maybe make a cast or anything of the footprint or anything, I mean, to find a footprint out there like size 15 or size 18 or 20, okay, sunk in the ground somewhere, I mean, barefooted would make you kind of like suspicious. Something is strange out there.
Well, you can't really talk about, my name and not talk about the London tracks. That was a series of 122 footprints that a large group of us were a part of, that my son and me basically documented and invited people to be a part of this casting and documentation process of 122 footprints roaming out over the Cottage Grove lake bed. They were well documented, well publicized back in 2012. People are on the fence whether or not these tracks are legitimate. Cliff is in the camp that these are hoaxes, Cliff Berkman, and I'm still not 100% with Cliff on that theory, although he brings up some very interesting points. So I went ahead and made a small documentary on a YouTube channel called Off Track, where I go back over the issue for 15 or 20 minutes. I digress into the London Trackway out of all the interesting things that happened there and why I'm still on the fence about some of these things, mainly the fact that the tracks were never reported. It's kind of a long story how these Bigfoot tracks came about to be cast, but we pulled 122 plaster casts out of a lake bed over a period of 4 days back in a stormy February night in 2012. And they're very unique looking tracks to the point where someone put a lot of work into hoaxing this. So if they were hoaxed by somebody that knows Bigfoot really well. That's what I'll say.
Well, another thing on tracks, a lot of times too, even Ron brought this up, and I've heard this from other guests, that that there'll be footprints, right? They'll be going out to nowhere, and all of a sudden they stop.
Disappear.
Disappear, just like there's like one step more, and the second step isn't there, and it's nothing. And it's no way where it turned around and went back. It's just like, it vanished.
Right. Yeah, that happened with these tracks. No one really talked about that fact, but these tracks, they just kind of faded away. And, so the London tracks was back in 2012, but I'll go ahead and bring up the Al Moon prints back in March 30th. I believe it was the 30th of March. And it was Good Friday of this year. It was the blue moon or the Al Moon. So we were up on the backside of one of the mountains out here in Cottage Grove on an elk hunt. Daryl Adams, as a Bigfoot enthusiast and witness, and he recently moved up here to Cottage Grove from Southern Oregon area, and he had drawn a tag for an elk print on the backside of his house, actually, very close. And so it wasn't much work for us to get up there, but we decided to do a twofer where we could do a little squatching and a little elk hunting. So we're keeping our eye out, on a beautiful sunny March day, and it was Good Friday. And so didn't find anything of real interest until he said, well, let's go see these stick structures. I think I found something really interesting up here. And I said, okay, Daryl, let's do it. So we were going up around the corner towards where the stick structures were back in this poison oak patch. And we're driving along in his truck, and I'm sitting in the passenger side, and I see elk, look like buck or elk tracks kind of mixed together, and then they kind of just stop, and then they shoot back the other way. They do a 180 off in the mud, and there's this 30-degree bank that's about 6-7 feet up at a 30-degree angle, and it's this red, really sticky red clay. And next to these tracks were these divots. And I said, Daryl, stop, back up. And so we back up the truck, and they're just very pronounced deep pockets in the mud. And they're a left one and a right one. They're about oh gosh, I don't remember the exact width of what everything was here. I have a Facebook site, which I'll mention later here, where I get into the details of these prints. But we got out of the truck and immediately started rolling camera just in case. I thought, well, these are elk tracks of some kind or degree. Maybe this is a bear, maybe this is a horse. And as you get into these divots, which kind of look like a basketball had bounced in the mud twice and then disappeared, you could see hair flow down in especially the right side. And they're fairly deep. And so the hair flow goes into what looks like anatomy and skin. And you could see this just like you would punch your hand in Play-Doh. You could see all the anatomy in your fist develop in that Play-Doh after you pull it straight out. Well, imagine that in red clay on a larger scale with something that looked like a knee. And as we got in closer with the camera, we could see black hairs sticking out vertically from mainly the bottom portion of the divot there in the crater. We'll call it a crater. And so we back up and we kind of put our head around what we're looking at, and we go, over all the things that it could be or couldn't be. And there's a lot of things that in our mind it couldn't be. And it just didn't look right for an elk or a deer at all, just based upon how round it was, how it was leaning, kind of tilted in at an angle. And then these marks above it and to the side of it almost look like an appendage, a left appendage kind of reaching up and a right longer appendage next to the right knee. So it wasn't looking very bearish. There was no sign of that. But it sure was more likely than what we found out. We ended up casting the entire set of knees as one unit with a bag of Fix-It-All. We stayed up till about 2 a.m. underneath the owl moon casting these prints. We secured them as one piece, and then we let them dry in a garage for a period of 3 weeks. But before we even poured any plaster, we documented everything on camera, and we even documented, and we made sure that we really specifically documented any hair collection before it got contaminated. So we're pulling individual hairs out on camera with latex glove and tweezers that are, just recently, within the hour purchased at the Dollar General down in Cottage Grove. And
now wait a minute. Now, hey, tell everybody where Cottage Grove is. I think, isn't it midway between Portland and, the California border? Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. Yeah. So it's about 20 minutes south of Eugene, home of the Ducks. And it's just a small little sleepy town, best known for its meth problem back in the 1980s, and known for its association with Buster Keaton, the silent film actor that filmed The General out there. They did have a pretty significant drug problem, to the point where Nancy Reagan mentioned it in her Just Say No campaign. That's why I jokingly brought the the drug issue up of Cottage Grove. But anyway, it's a beautiful historic town.
Don't forget, and a lot of bikers like it. Because I'm a biker, like it because of the bridge. The covered bridge.
Oh
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Lots of covered bridges, and that town was probably devastated due to what happened to the logging industry in the early 80s, like so many towns that had struggled to kind of get themselves, back out of, back out of unemployment, sudden unemployment with the spotted owl and whatnot. So that's not an uncommon thing to turn to a bottle or pills after those things. You see it all over the small towns. But Cottage Grove has made a tremendous rebound from that. And so, when the London tracks came around, we named them the London tracks. Tom Pell came up with the idea to not name those tracks after a person because ego was involved. And he said, let's name them after this small little town. In fact, let's name them after the street, near where they were found. So they were found near the town of Little London off London Road. And so when I found these deep prints, I'm like, Daryl, it's, first of all, it's better to name them after the area or an event than after yourself, because if they come back as not legit, you don't have egg all over your face. So just a note to self, don't name these tracks after yourself. Name them after the area or an event. And so it was the Owl Moon or Good Friday or the Blue Moon. We chose the Owl Moon. And the meticulous grabbing of the hairs, we filmed all that, stuck them in an envelope, and about a week later I sent them up to Cindy Dosen, who's associated with the Olympic Project, and she has a hominid enigma study that she has founded up in Canada, and she's actively looking for Sasquatch hair. So we sent them to her, and I said, Cindy, let's do something with this strange brow, if you don't mind. This will be my Geraldo moment with this crowd here, and the bank vault of Al Capone will either be full or empty. And if it's empty, I want you to come on and tell the crowd what it is, what this hair belongs to. And so the day came along. It was the March episode of Strange Brow that we did. Unfortunately, the live feed cut, and we weren't able to get her on film saying this, but we have a piece of it on film, and we put it up on the website. But I addressed the crowd about everything I just told you, and I said, we have these interesting prints. They look like knees of a giant, two-legged something. And anyway, Cindy came on, and she says, the bank vault is not empty. the bank vault's full. Those weren't her words; those are mine. But in fact, she said, these. In fact, I'll read you the paper.
Yeah, please do read it to the listeners there.
Sure. So the hominid enigma paper from the 1.5 hair samples sent to Cindy, dated April 26th. In particular, she was interested in the lack of a medulla, which is the internal core of the hair. And she wrote, medulla was not defined in the hair. It was amorphous, trace-void bodies in the medulla area. She talked about the hair tip. She goes down a couple points here in the paper and mentions the hair has a natural worn tapered tip associated with a limb hair. So, okay, that's interesting, because she's able to pinpoint what kind of hair this is and what part of the body it came from. So
it sounds like maybe leg or arm.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Then she says under notes, hair measurement 1 inch long, reddish brown, likeness comparison to the ocean shore baby Sasquatch hair from my database, which was a hair that was collected by Scott Taylor out of a swimming pool and sent to her in, I think, large clumps. The conclusion of the paper here, the following has been determined to be from a microscopic hair examination. The sample may have come from a loose hair in its last stages of resting growth. No post-mortem banding on hair to indicate death. This was from a live animal. All other animal species have been ruled out. This is, capital letters here, this is a unknown hair. So the unknown hair phenomena from something that is 1,400 pounds. And how do I know it was 1,400 pounds? Because I talked to Scott Taylor, who's an engineer that works at Boeing, and he helped me do the math on my knee prints. We did it 2 different ways, where I was slamming my knees into the clay at the same spot at the same day, and then I was doing a resting squat, and then I cast my knees, and we were able to do a surface area comparison on my weight, and we came up with 1,400 pounds for the Al Moon print. So we have something rather large with an unknown hair type of an appendage. In fact, she told me lower appendage based upon the hair sample that she had. And so I feel comfortable enough taking a leap of faith, saying the word "these" associated with this, because since we've taken the layers of clay off of these plaster prints, you can see the anatomy where it should be for a knee present, and what looks like a shin starting to come down, and the suction point of where the knee had sucked back out of the clay, where the plaster kind of fanned out due to where the dirt was displaced. And bone anatomy, you can see skin slough and hair slough There are hairs still coming out of the plaster, pointing vertically up with the roots hanging out into the air on these knee prints. So, it's an interesting set of circumstances.